would be great. Not a problem. Thanks, Marta and Thomas. And my name is Hannah Schultz. I am the president of People First Economy. We work primarily in Western Michigan, but also do some work across the state as well. And we represent over 1,000 businesses here in the area that also strive to be good stewards of the environment, the people around them, and the community, and similar to the triple bottom line that Thomas was mentioning. So I've had the privilege of having a lot of conversations with small local business owners over the course of the last several months, and sort of tracking and helping to navigate businesses through what has been kind of a deluge of information and available relief funding, or then lack of available relief funding, and how businesses can apply or should apply, and what is most applicable to each business. And we typically work with businesses with less than 50 employees. That's kind of our size. For the most part, we do have some larger businesses and plenty of mom and pop shops as well. But over the last several months, we have, when the summer, when peak summer was in swing in Michigan, the cities, municipalities, communities did a really nice job of helping businesses to optimize their outdoor seating, continue to bring in as much revenue as possible. And as Marta touched upon earlier, as the winter sets in and the temperature gets cooler, we're looking at a number of different challenges, in addition to, our typical flu season coming at us as well as spiking numbers of COVID. And so the conversations around what businesses need right now has shifted into trying to be a little bit proactive, trying to kind of recognize the patterns as they have arisen over the course of the last half a year. And a big component of this is paid leave, and paid leave from a couple of different angles. One being businesses that have participated so far in the programs that are available, and have, Thomas mentioned that there's a hesitation to participate in something that has a kind of an upfront cost at times, and we certainly understand that. But the businesses that have done so and taken on that cost, the outcomes of that and the way that they're able to hang on to employees that otherwise might have needed to drop off, might have needed to stay on unemployment, might have needed to quit or not show up for shifts, and all these challenging situations, particularly when we're thinking about our shift work, our service work, any of these frontline essential employees that we all count on to help us just manage our day to day. And so this paid leave component of any and all relief packages is a really crucial component. And Marta mentioned this too, and I think it's very important to kind of touch upon the fact that so many businesses that really create the fabric and culture of our communities, they do consider their employees their family. They care very deeply for everyone that's committing themselves to working for these businesses, and the commitment is shared. I think that there's been some conversation about the increase of the unemployment amounts, and we have seen really overall that individuals who work for these companies truly want to get back to work. They truly want to go to work and serve their community, serve the business that they care very deeply about. And, the only thing holding them back is a fear of getting sick, of not being protected, of needing to, take off work because they're sick, and not having a safety net there so that they can support their families. And so I think, as a small business owner, so many of our colleagues that own small businesses are needing to step in themselves to wait tables, step in themselves to run cash registers, to manage components of the business that they haven't had to run in a while, because they have been able to staff, a really talented and loyal crew of people. And so every time a business owner needs to step in that way, they are losing out on time that they need to innovate around their business model right now, so that they can continue to survive through the COVID spikes and hopefully longer term recovery. And it's very important, to think about it this way. Our business owners having to make extremely challenging decisions every single day. They're having to show up not knowing what's going to happen. They may have staff not show up. They may have staff, arrive and maybe they are sick and they have to send them home because the employee doesn't want to miss a shift and miss out on that paycheck. And so these decisions and every single, aspect of these logistics that are needed right now to operate any type of business, any size of business, is incredible, especially on a limited capacity, at the limited capacity that our business owners are operating right now. So, the ability to glean so much of this information from our business owners from this last 7 months and go into what will hopefully be a new relief package coming out here shortly, hopefully, to be able to use that information and to craft something that is truly going to help our small businesses, our locally owned businesses survive and thrive through, this next phase, especially in Michigan as it gets cold and then warms up again. And as as schools open and close and parents and business owners are struggling to figure out how they're going to manage on a day-to-day basis, allowing for an additional precautionary safety net for employees to feel comfortable staying home when they're sick and not being afraid that they're not going to be able to feed their families or pay their mortgage or rent is, truly the most important crux of this conversation. And so it's an honor for me to be able to kind of help elevate the conversations that I've been having with business owners. And I'm happy to answer any questions that are specific to any of the information. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity to look at some data. But again, I think the anecdotal experiences that those of us who are in these spaces and having conversations with business owners is really important as well, because each business runs itself very differently, and each business owner is having to, again, bend themselves over backwards to figure out what each different day, what each week is going to hold. And so any precaution, anything that we can do really to help these business owners be able to focus on the operations of their business and not on, these small little logistics that trip folks up time and time again, causing businesses to close is really key. Thanks for the time. Yeah, happy to answer questions or whatever is helpful.
Thank you so much. Hannah, that was a really great overview as to some of the challenges you've been working with businesses on to survive and thrive as much as possible during this pandemic, and the role of paid leave and their experience with paid leave within the COVID relief packages. I see that Congressman Kildee has just joined us. So I wanted to give a little bit of an overview to him and welcome him officially to our conversation here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So we were just giving an overview. We have a few participants now, but I think what we've noticed is we're going to share the recording of this with other business leaders and business owners that we've been working with over the past, I don't know, it feels like a million months of the pandemic, but to be able to keep them updated because they're very concerned about the status of another round of the relief packages, especially the program built within that package, which was FCRA, that allowed many of them to have a mechanism in which to provide more paid leave that responds to this pandemic. And so I wanted to give an opportunity for you to share with us, just a little bit of your experience working on some of these packages. And then if you could share with us a little bit of, where negotiations are right now for another round of them as we're, going into the end of election season and then heading into lame duck, but also winter and an enormous rise in COVID cases. So just some light stuff for you to cover.
Right. Well, I'll take a few minutes and sort of run through that, and then would love to take whatever questions we have time for. And I first of all, just want to say thanks. I mean, obviously we'd all like to be able to do some of these sorts of events together, but it is good at least to be able to meet virtually. And I want to thank Andy Levitt, who was once my chief of staff and a great partner for arranging for me to be here. In terms of congressional action, we have, I mean, it's important that we remind ourselves that at the outset of all of this, we had 4 bipartisan bills that were passed in almost unanimous fashion. I think maybe 1 or 2 of them were, that help virtually all sectors of society, from small businesses to healthcare to families. And it does show that Congress can act quickly, when the situation demands it. There are also 2 substantial bills that have only passed the House, and we can chat a bit about that. But sort of starting with the initial intervention, and some of this I'm sure you all know, but I think it's good to kind of establish a baseline of where we are. The Paycheck Protection Program was really intended to provide support to businesses, to support their payrolls especially, but also modified to cover other costs, to make sure that we're able to keep people connected to work, to their business, to their job, and to keep those businesses standing, so that when we're on the other side of this, we haven't lost so much of the essential elements of our economy, especially small and medium-sized businesses. It's helpful. I mean, I support it, don't get me wrong, but I do think that we missed the mark in some ways. And this kind of goes to some of the legislation that we've been pushing. We missed the mark because I think it left out a lot of very small businesses that are sort of the Main Street businesses in small and mid-sized communities and neighborhoods around the country. And these are the sort of companies that were not going to sign loan documents that require a personal guarantee when they may already have been operating on pretty thin margins, probably out of their own pockets or on their own credit, maybe even on credit cards. And the idea of taking on debt to cover those ongoing expenses, even when we know it was intended to be forgiven, it required a guarantee that the loan would be paid back. And I was concerned, and still am concerned, that we've missed a lot of businesses that under any circumstance they were not going to take up that program. So I worked with Senator Booker on the Senate side, and to be fair, Senator Daines, his partner, and on the House side, I worked with Fred Upton, Brian Fitzpatrick, 2 Republicans, and Dwight Evans from Philadelphia, to put together the Relief for Main Street Act, which recognizes that lots of local communities, whether through government or nonprofits, set up relief funds. We wanted to provide direct capital to those relief funds so that we could give, essentially relief grants, rescue grants to those very small businesses, not in the form of a loan, but just in the form of direct support, relief, to help them get through this. We looked at where we thought the failure was, thought about 50 billion, which sounds like a lot of money, but when you talk about all the very small businesses in this country, it's the right number. That should be used on a formula basis to go out to these most distressed communities and really focus on employers with 20 or fewer employees, focus on minority and women-owned businesses, underserved areas. We were able to get 15 billion, one year of funding for this concept that Corey and I came up with in the House-passed version, the most recent House-passed version of the HEROES Act. So obviously we think that, is a step in the right direction, and we hope that when we get to the next piece of legislation, number one, that we include that, and secondly, that it's not too late. And I know one area of interest that you all have been focused on is paid leave. The first bill, one of the first bills we passed, was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which provided 2 weeks of paid leave at the employer's regular rate, 2 weeks of paid sick leave at 2/3 of the employee's regular rate if they're taking care of a family member, 2 weeks if they're experiencing COVID at their full rate, 10 weeks of paid extended family and medical leave at 2/3 of the rate. And of course, that would be largely supported through direct tax credits to employers. We wanted to make that initial intervention tailored to what we saw as the emergent need at that point, people who were sick or had to take care of somebody that was sick, not losing their connection to their employer, not losing their job as a result. And so, I mean, I think like a lot of what we've done in COVID relief, it sort of opens up what we think is a natural conversation about these policies more broadly and more generally, which is why, we obviously many of us continue to support a more aggressive approach toward paid family leave. I'm an original co-sponsor of Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro's bill, the Family Act, which provides 12 weeks of partial wages to working people who need to take time to address a serious personal family health issue, like caring for a newborn or a newly adopted child, or circumstances arising from serious injury or illness or military deployment, actually, as well. Our workforce is changing. And even after this pandemic's over, we're going to have to tailor the way we structure this economy in a way that supports people staying connected to their employment. So you ask about future congressional action. It's up in the air. I mean, we had a letter from the speaker this morning. The concern I have is that we continued to negotiate, and we didn't just negotiate when and this was a position that I pushed very firmly. We passed the HEROES Act like 5 months ago, which was sort of we thought the next natural iteration of coronavirus relief that addressed the various aspects of the economy that we felt needed support, based on the principle that COVID-19 is real. Unfortunately, we don't have complete agreement in the country or even in the government about that. But based on the scientific, clear conclusion that this is a real threat, that we needed to provide relief so that businesses, healthcare providers, families could make the decisions that they need to make based on the guidance that we're being given by health professionals, by the experts, but to be able to make those decisions in a way that didn't sacrifice their economic viability, whether it's a business or a family. So basically, it's to provide the financial resources to allow people to make the decisions that are important for them to protect their health. And we not only passed that bill 5 months ago, but at my urging and then joined by many others, we took what at the point in time we left Congress, left the House in the end of July for our scheduled recess. I said, look, let's put our last best offer on the floor and prove that we're willing to negotiate, that we're willing to compromise, that we can find some middle ground. And so we put a $2.2 trillion measure on the floor, and we passed it. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, they've been all over the board. At one point they were at 1.5 trillion. They thought they would go 1.6. Then they went back to 500 billion. It's like shadow boxing. It was really difficult to figure out where Mitch McConnell was. And the only conclusion that I could come to is that they were never, ever serious about getting to yes. And that's obviously, that's a problem. And so the hope is that when we get through this election, either the mandate will be strong enough that we'll be able to get something done right away, or if, as some predict, there's some degree of chaos or upset after the election, the hope is that's because some of us are going to be in a much stronger position come January to take up where we left off, pass the kind of relief that we know we need to have, crush this virus, and get on about the business of trying to solve these bigger problems that we have. So that's the sort of the opening in a nutshell. I'd love to take whatever questions or comments that you have. So,
I know my colleague Hannah from People First Academy does have a question, but I wonder just on a logistics and timeline, mindset before we get into that, what There are, I believe, a few special elections in the Senate. Would that at all change the dynamics of this negotiation and the timeline to get to a shared agreement?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a possibility, just looking at the one, sort of talking about the politics of things, the Arizona race, where Mark Kelly, I think, is in a good position to win that seat and defeat Martha McSally. He would be sworn in within weeks because as soon as the election is certified, he would take office. So that, has the potential of changing the dynamic a bit. That's the one that we're looking at.
Got it.
But
Yeah, I
think
don't
the
want
real
to
question
dive
is
us
whether
into like the
there's any sort
politics
of
too much, but
momentum or mandate coming out the election.
got it. That's helpful. Yeah, I was just
Can you
curious
hear me?
because I think,
See me okay? You look like you're frozen.
am I frozen? Uh-oh.
No,
Okay.
you're good, Marta, at least
Okay.
on my end.
All right. Well, I want to give Hannah an opportunity. She has been really working closely with a lot of businesses all over the state, as well as in West Michigan. And she has a question that she'd like to ask.
Thanks, Marta, and thank you for joining us today, Representative Kildee. We really appreciate it. As Marta mentioned, my organization, we are located in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We do serve businesses throughout the state, primarily that small business, that under 25 employees size that you had mentioned. And so throughout my conversations with many business owners in our community, there have been a couple of consistent sort of pieces of feedback that I would love to hear your thoughts on. And one is particularly as it pertains to paid leave. And this kind of, this spans all of the other, and the Relief on Main bill that you and Senator Booker cooked up is amazing, and I appreciate the thought behind that. And I think a challenge that we have seen as being one of the kind of on the ground organizations working directly with small businesses is
hold on, can you leave that door? Wi-Fi is really bad.
Oh, shoot.
Sorry, I have a door open. I'm having trouble catching some of this because the Wi-Fi is kind of skipping around.
Oh, no problem. And so here's my question. That was just a little bit of background, but here's my question. Really, we have been working hard to disseminate information, accurate and up-to-date information to business owners, since March. And that has been a challenge because there's so much fatigue around new information. And a lot of this is maybe at a higher level of understanding than a business owner might have about certain policies, or, especially when it comes to paid leave or the FCRA bill and others. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts on how you might disseminate if and when you are able to achieve some of this that you're working towards, how you might work with partners on the ground to get the information to businesses in a way that's consumable, accessible, and really will reach the businesses that need it most, particularly when we're talking about our business owners of color and other marginalized communities.
Great, and I apologize a little bit. The Wi-Fi is sort of jumping around, but I think I got the question. And can you hear me okay? Am I coming through all right?
Totally fine, yeah.
Good. Yeah, I think this has been a real significant problem. In fact, if we look at that first iteration of support for family and medical leave that we passed, the Congressional Budget Office scored the cost of that at something around $100 billion. And we've seen, a few hundred million utilized. And I don't think that's so much. I think there are two problems. One, I think they overscored it. Secondly, because they have to expect the worst case scenario. They don't want to have utilization that far exceeds what they said it was going to cost. I get that. But I think the problem is, and I try not to be too political in this analysis, but the truth of the matter is personnel is policy. And the people within the government, within the federal government, have a responsibility to communicate through as effective a means as possible these benefits. And if fundamentally some of the people that we've been working with within this administration aren't really on board with a more progressive approach to family medical leave, it's difficult to see that they're going to even attempt to push it out there. I think that's one aspect of it. I think the other problem we had, to be more fair about it, I guess, and balanced, is, I shouldn't say fair and balanced, I didn't mean to say it that way, but to be more inclusive in terms of an explanation, there were so many other moving parts going on with Paycheck Protection Program, with tax credits for employee retention, with stimulus payments and all this stuff. I think in part, it may have been more difficult to communicate family medical and leave opportunities because for the most part, businesses were just trying to figure out how to stay alive. And many of their people who were unemployed were able to collect unemployment because they didn't have a requirement to be searching for work. So some who might otherwise have taken advantage of family medical leave may have ended up on unemployment. But I think it kind of makes the point. We need to take the lessons of this and apply them as we move forward.
Thank you. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Now that the window's been propped or the door has been propped open.
Right.
I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for your co-sponsorship of the Family Act. That I think we saw that as a really wonderful step forward, even though it wasn't able to fully move forward.
If you could type your question in too, because it's frozen on my screen.
There, I typed it in. Just curious about the prospects for another Family Act in the next Congress, and your thoughts on that.
Oh,
I know. I think we might have.
Did we lose the congressman?
We might have. Hopefully he will pop back in. At the very worst case scenario, if he's not able to pop back in, we can definitely follow back up with, oh, here he is, good. All right.
There I am, okay. I don't know what's going on.
It's not a pandemic if there isn't, a few Zoom bloopers, so.
It's 2020. That's
Yeah. Basically, I wanted to know, in addition, after thanking you for co-sponsoring the Family Act, to inquire on your view on the prospects of that with a new Congress in 2021. Not knowing exactly what the makeup is, but what's your general sense on the future prospects of the Family Act?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? I would say it largely depends on what happens next Tuesday. But assuming by new Congress, you mean not just another Congress, but a truly new one, I think it's very good. I think, the country has come along. The private sector, clearly, and the leadership that you all represent is a good example of that, have come along and understand the positive economics of these policies. And I think very often the biggest problem that we face in policy development generally, but this is an excellent example of it, is that we confuse cost and value. Cost is an immediate moment. Value is realized over a longer period of time. And unfortunately, many of my colleagues are willing to think about that value equation only when it relates to tax policy, meaning tax cut, what the return on those investments really provide to us in terms of economic output. I think we're going to have a shot if we have the outcome that I'm hoping for on Tuesday. This would be something I think would be fairly early on the agenda for us.
That's great to to hear that. And I think the other question that we have, especially since the FICRA is set to expire at the end of the year and some of the unknowns with both the election and lame duck, what are things that small and mid-sized businesses in Michigan can do to support the extension of that and make it more likely that we'll have another relief package that includes a FICRA extension?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those times where direct advocacy is the most important thing you can do. And we don't know what the Congress is going to look like in January, but I don't think we can necessarily wait until January. That's why I'm hoping that there's something that feels like a mandate coming out of Tuesday, a mandate to act, however people want to interpret that. And it may be that some of our colleagues, on the other side of the aisle, whose predisposition might be that they're willing to talk about something like this, will feel emboldened to act after the November election. That's my hope. So I don't think we need to punt until January, mid-January or late January, because if it waits for a president who's willing to sign it, that may, be February. We have a deadline of December 11 for a spending bill that we have to pass. It has been my suggestion, and it's a shared point of view by lots of members, not just me, that deadline be utilized, that we use the leverage that we typically have by having a must-pass piece of legislation staring us in the face to put a comprehensive coronavirus relief bill on the floor that would include all of these elements so that, we can get it done. And I think now having a better idea of what the true cost is should inform our decision-making and actually make it more palatable to some.
That's interesting. Amidst all of the flurry of things that have been happening, I forgot about that opportunity for the normal things that we do or that we have our elected officials do.
Yeah.
We have a question from Mike Shesterkin from Southeast Michigan Sustainable Business Forum, one of our partners as well. With the original PPP and these issues associated with the debt load of small Main Street businesses, as well as the capacity for small businesses to administer such programs, what are your thoughts about administering these programs? In other words, what will it take to provide small businesses with the support they need to administer loan and grant programs like SCORE, et cetera? It's also written out here, but in the chat.
I'm going to read it because
he's very prolific and well-spoken.
Yeah, I mean, as I take the question, I think the part of the problem that we had was with PPP did have to do with the administration and the risk aversion that both lenders have and that employers naturally have to consider. And that's why my thought was, two things. One, our legislation that we just passed would substantially reduce some of the burden in terms of administration of even the PPP program. For loans of less than $150,000, for example, significantly lower thresholds of certification and documentation provided for loan forgiveness. For loans under $50,000, basically a record retention requirement and forgiveness being assumed based on certifications by the employer. I don't know if that's where the question goes, but it would certainly help. And then, of course, we feel like the Main Street Relief Act, which is administered by local nonprofits and local governments, would make it easier to deal with these loan and grant programs. Just take some of the red tape out of the way. So if we can get, like for PPP, the threshold requirements for forgiveness significantly reduced for smaller and very small loans especially, and then have this other product that Corey and I Senator Booker and I have been pushing, I think we get some of the real problems solved without having to sacrifice the integrity of the program as it needs to be applied to those larger loans that, as we know, in some cases have really been problematic.
one of our partners, the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council, has been very concerned about the inequities that businesses are facing, with about 40% of Black-owned businesses expected to not survive the pandemic. And that's alarming. So it was great to hear that you've been working with Senator Booker and others on specific mechanisms that can better reach businesses that haven't been able to access PPP and are struggling and facing some hard decisions and difficult obstacles that other businesses aren't facing.
Yeah, just one other piece that we did push is to make sure that local community development financial institutions, which are much more aligned with those disadvantaged businesses, whether it's minority, women-owned businesses, be provided access to the PPP program. Actually, our initial draft of the Main Street Relief Act included that provision, but then that provision was actually included in the HEROES Act, so we felt like it was covered.
I want to thank you for your time. And then just one final question that I've heard from some members, which maybe there's been clarification recently that I haven't been alerted to, but just for businesses that are looking to wrap up their PPP obligations that have been able to participate in the program, do you have any clear way to point people to how to navigate that? And how to make good on that commitment, or mutual commitment. I think that's one that I've heard from folks on, that there's some confusion on it. Maybe that's still to come, but.
Yeah, I think it would, first of all, I think we have to fix part of the problem. And that is, if we could get one of these bills over the line, we would include these changes to the requirements for loan forgiveness. I mean, when we appropriated this money, we intended it to be direct support. It really is not a loan. It wasn't intended to be a loan. The loan construct was intended to create some integrity in the process, so that if it was abused, there was a easy clawback that we would have to go after, or not even make the forgiveness available. So, but having said that, I think it's more on us to change those requirements so that we don't put people through lots of hoops. I would say, and my staff will love me for this, maybe they're out of earshot, if folks are really having problems, reach out to your congressional office, because we can typically cut through some of the red tape that folks have to go through.
Thank you so much. You have given us not only your time, but some really expert insight into what's happened so far, being on the Ways and Means Committee, as well as, you've been so active in a lot of these solutions around federal paid leave and fighting for Main Street businesses. We appreciate your work, and thank you for your time, Congressman.
Thank you. Sorry we had some Zoom issues, but it wouldn't be a Zoom meeting if somebody didn't
That's right.
off and have to come
Wouldn't be
back.
2020 without a little bit of technical
That's
difficulty.
right. Thank
My
you
goodness.
all. I really
Thank you for your
appreciate it.
time.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thanks.
And to let everyone know, we're going to add in at the end of this recording and to the chat a link on the federal paid leave that we were trying to share earlier from Trisha's presentation on the Panorama study on federal paid leave, so people can get a better sense of that. But Thomas, thank you as well for your time. Is there any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with us around either what Congressman Kildee has shared or on federal paid leave?
Well, let me just emphasize a point that Congressman Kildee made, and that is the importance of direct advocacy and the importance of the business community to have a voice, not just large businesses, not just the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but Main Street businesses, small and medium-sized businesses who have a different perspective, and particularly members of organizations like yours, like the American Sustainable Business Council, that are focused on a high road economy, on providing things like a fair and equitable wage for their employees, paid leave, other responsible, reasonable benefits that I think I loved, again, Congressman Kildee's formulation. There's a difference between cost, that short-term cost, what I have to pay today, and value what that cost is worth over time. And education is one of those where, we recognize it costs something today, but the value keeps paying back. I think paid leave is going to be, should be considered in the same light. Helping people take care of themselves and their families is what this country is all about. And I think, what sustainable business is all about. So thank you to everybody there in Michigan for your assistance and your efforts and your work and your advocacy. And we'll be there with you side by side.
Thank you. And thank you again, Hannah, as well. I think your perspective that you shared and the questions that you contributed were really valuable and helped deepen our conversation today.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks again, Thomas. Thanks, Marta.
Thanks,
you.
Hannah.
All right. Have a great morning, everyone. Back to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.